1783. In Paris, the delegates of the British government and the rebel colonies are finalizing the peace treaty that will recognize the birth of the United States of America. On May 6th, in Tappan, New York, at General Washington's headquarters, a meeting takes place between the commander of the Continental Army and Sir Guy Carleton, the British commander-in-chief in North America. The issue to be discussed is the British evacuation of New York and the thousands of loyalists that have reached the city and were not willing to live in the new republic. Among them are thousands of runaway slaves that have found refuge behind the British lines and whose destiny is now fully uncertain. The issue of slavery is particularly controversial. Despite the plea for freedom that fueled the revolt against Britain, the colonies maintained an economy largely built upon the exploitation of African slaves, especially in the South. And their role in the slave economy notwithstanding, the British local authorities tried, since the beginning, to weaponize this contradiction against the rebels. In 1775, the royal governor of Virginia, Lord Dunmore, famously proclaimed that each slave who took arms against their rebel masters would have been granted freedom. Dunmore created a short-lived Ethiopian legion, but was defeated by the rebels and left Virginia. In 1779, Sir Henry Clinton, the British commander-in-chief in North America, proclaimed that, "I do promise to every Negro who shall desert the rebel standard, full security to follow within these lines any occupation which he shall think proper." When, in 1780, the war moved south and the British liberated South Carolina, thousands of slaves joined the British Army in many capacities, from scouts and drummers to laborers and officers' servants. Many of these were recaptured when the Southern Campaign ended with Cornwallis' surrender in Yorktown. However, some were able to reach the last British strongholds in the continent, especially New York. In 1782, as the British were planning to leave New York, Loyalists faced a mix of fear and uncertainty, knowing they would soon be at the mercy of the victorious Patriots, many of whom viewed them as traitors. Runaway slaves and black loyalists who had sought refuge with the British, having been promised freedom, feared betrayal, as rumors spread that they might be returned to their former masters despite their service. It was amid these uncertainties that, at the beginning of May, Sir Guy Carleton, who had succeeded Clinton, disgraced after Yorktown, prepared the meeting with Washington. An encounter laden with tension. Guy Carleton, a soldier of Anglo-Irish origin, was a close friend of General James Wolfe and played a key role in the British capture of Quebec in 1759, serving as quartermaster general and helping to plan the siege that led to Wolfe's victory.
Come follow the hero that goes to Quebec. Jump aboard of the transport and lose every sail.
Later, as governor of Quebec, Carleton championed the Quebec Act of 1774, which preserved French civil law, protected Catholic rights, and extended Quebec's territory, angering American colonists but securing the loyalty of French Canadians to the British Crown. In 1775, he successfully defended the city against the American invasion, organizing a determined resistance that culminated in the defeat of Benedict Arnold and Richard Montgomery's forces. His leadership ensured British control over Canada, reinforcing its status as a loyalist stronghold during the American Revolution. Given his experience, loyalty, and diplomatic skill, he was the natural choice to succeed Clinton as commander-in-chief in America in 1782. Washington and Carleton had already exchanged polite letters in the preceding months, but the meeting in May 1783 was their first and only face-to-face encounter. A record of the discussion was drafted by Judge William Smith, a loyalist advisor to the British in New York. Washington sought clarity on the British withdrawal and, crucially, the return of escaped slaves. Citing Article 7 of the soon-to-be-signed peace treaty in Paris, he insisted on the preservation of property, especially enslaved individuals, who, according to the treaty, were not to be removed. In Smith's account, Washington proceeded upon the supposition that there was a treaty and delivered himself without animation, with great slowness and a low tone of voice. When he had enlarged upon his points a little, Sir Guy Carleton, who heard without interruption, replied that he should proceed to the evacuation with all possible expedition, but it must of necessity take time. That he had sent a fleet already to Nova Scotia with about 6,000 souls. That to prevent the irregular embarkation of property, he had appointed persons to inspect the ships, and as to Negroes to make a registry that the owners might eventually be paid for the slaves who were entitled to their freedom by British proclamations and promises. To Washington's surprise, Carleton remained resolute. Those whom the Crown had declared free would not be re-enslaved. As Smith recorded, Sir Guy observed that no interpretation could be put upon the articles inconsistent with prior engagements binding the national honor, which must be kept with all color, and he added that the only mode was to pay for the Negroes, in which case justice was done to all parties, the slave and his owner. The meeting continued cordially, focusing on technical details regarding the timing and logistics of the British evacuation. The issue of slavery was not raised again. Yet, in the end, Carleton upheld Britain's pledge, ensuring that thousands of formerly enslaved people would depart with the British rather than face re-enslavement in the newly independent American Republic. In the months leading up to the final departure, British authorities in New York meticulously documented the black loyalists, compiling what became known as the Book of Negroes, a detailed registry listing those eligible for resettlement. To ensure their safe passage, Brigadier General Samuel Birch issued certificates of freedom allowing them to embark on ships bound for Canada. By November 1783, thousands of black loyalists had sailed for Nova Scotia, where they established new settlements, the largest being Birchtown, named in honor of the general who had secured their passage. Though life in Nova Scotia was harsh and promises of land grants were often delayed or denied, these communities endured, laying the foundations for a free black presence in British North America. On November 25, 1783, shortly after the final British troops departed, General George Washington triumphantly entered New York City, marking the end of British rule and the beginning of American sovereignty over its last occupied stronghold. Sir Guy Carleton's decision to uphold Britain's pledge to its black allies marked one of the most significant acts of moral defiance in the Revolutionary era, ensuring that thousands who had risked everything for liberty would not be abandoned to slavery. Carleton returned to Britain after overseeing the evacuation, but his service to the Crown was far from over. In 1786, he was appointed Governor-in-Chief of British North America, where he worked to stabilize the new loyalist settlements and manage tensions with both the French Canadians and indigenous nations. For his service, he was elevated to the peerage as Lord Dorchester in 1786. As governor, Carleton played a key role in shaping the Constitutional Act of 1791, which divided Quebec into Upper and Lower Canada, laying the groundwork for a stable British colonial government and earning him recognition as one of the founding fathers of Canada.